各位观众朋友们，大家好，我是 Katrina Chen 陈伟珍。今天非常高兴能够请到我们卑诗省一位非常重量级的政治家，而且她还是一位多元文化女性，曾经担任律师多年，她也是一位全职的妈妈，然后在我们的社区里面从事过非常多重要的社区工作。那她目前呢是我们的副省长跟我们的正律厅长。Let's give a warm welcome to our Deputy Minister, Attorney General, and MLA, Niki Sharma.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Really welcome to our show, and your title is really long. But I did gave a quick introduction about you also being a woman of color with very diverse lived experiences. You being a lawyer, you're a mom as well yourself. Very busy life and very busy family. And for our Chinese language audience who may not know you as much, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how did you get into politics?
Oh, sure. Yeah. First of all, it's so great to be on the show with you. I'm very excited to be interviewed by you. It's really I don't think I ever really had much exposure to politics growing up. Probably not unlike a lot of first generation kids. My parents came from India to a very small town, so Sparwood, it's like 3,000-4,000 people. We were one of the only Indian families, and I think a lot of my experience growing up was just them reestablishing their life and figuring out life in Sparwood. And so I never really thought about politics, for example, at all, probably. I don't think honestly embarrassed to say, I don't think I probably knew who my MLA was or my MP was growing up. And I think the real connection was the lines between building a life and the systems that are in place to help you do that. I think a lot of families that are immigrants, they see that all the time with the barriers that are happening, what it's like to rebuild a life, what the obstacles are. And I saw my parents kind of really struggle. And, we had a family business and we were all working in it. It was like the classic story, right? Of growing up. And it's honestly, when I started working as a lawyer, it was another example of how the system can work for people and against people. You could see that all the time in law. And I started to get involved very locally in politics. So just on the park board level in Vancouver, so local issues, because
it's a big city though.
It's a big city, but honestly, the thing that I would credit to being in politics was being inspired by leaders that I thought, wow, they're making real change, and I would just love to be a part of that. So it was just me volunteering with a local politician, Sarah Blythe, at one point. And then it was you too, right? I got a chance I got a chance to work with you on the childcare file provincially. And it was such a gift because, when you're working in law and as a lawyer, you do a lot of things for your client. But when you're in government, you can do things to make the system better, right? And help everybody in that system, and that's a real gift and opportunity, and I got to see you work as a minister firsthand, and it really taught me a lot of things.
Thank you.
So it was kind of a journey of being inspired by people, I guess.
This interview is really about you, Thank you.
So so I feel fortunate in my life to have been around those people that showed me what's possible, and then I continually learn and I guess try to figure it out. So
Well, I was going to start with a personal story, but I thought let you introduce yourself first, because you can tell, as our audience can see, she's a very, very humble person. But I always remember the first time I met you was years and years ago during the civic election, maybe in 2014. We were at the temple together, and I didn't know you at the time, but you were pretty famous actually at the time, especially as a young woman of color, a mother who is campaigning for a council at the time, and you were already on Parks Board. And I just remember walking to the temple and I saw you. I was like, oh, that's Niki Sharma. I saw you online and everything. And you were holding your young daughter. And I was running for school board, and I was just really struggling about being a mom with a newborn. My son is just a few months younger than your daughter. And I was just like, I don't know if I could do it. But when I saw you sitting there with your daughter, and your daughter is very calm, whereas my son is very active. Maybe that's a bonus too. But it just inspired me. And that was the first memory of meeting you in person. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And of course, having to get to know you over the years, you've done a lot of tremendous work in the community, and I've learned a lot from you. So can you tell us a little bit about your role now as Deputy Premier, which is huge. You're the second person in command in the provincial government, and you are also Attorney General, which is a huge ministry that deals with so many things. Can you tell us a little bit about your workload and issues that you're dealing with?
Sure. I feel like with the role, I feel really privileged to be in the roles that I have, and every day I have a team with me that we're trying to figure out how to make the systems better, like I talked about. One of the things that I'm really working through right now is how to make our systems better for family law. So when people are experiencing a breakup in the family, it's a really traumatic thing, right? And we want to make sure that our laws and our systems are helping resolve disputes and actually helping protect people when they need it in the right ways. And that's a pretty big role of the province, right? We set the family law and so many people are impacted by that. So it's one of the projects that I'm happy to talk about here because we just released a intentions paper on updates to the Family Law Act. And there are probably many families out there who've stepped into the family law system at different times in their life. And I love to hear the stories of how we can improve from people. So anybody out there that wants to help us by looking at that paper that's released now and understand if we're stepping in the right direction with the changes we're going to be making. In particular, we're making changes to when family violence shows up in a household, making it easier to get a protection order and making it last longer, and making sure that the definition of family violence captures everything that can happen in those relationships, and also making it easier for the interests of the kid and the safety of the kids in that part to be protected. So I really would love people to tell us if we're on the right track. It's one example of the work that we're doing, even though there's always tons going on. But I would really appreciate anybody's input on and if we're stepping in the right direction to making that better.
Well, I'm really happy to hear about the family law changes, especially in the legal system. I think most of us, hopefully we don't ever interact with the legal system, but when you do, it's most likely family law or properties and asset. And family law is a huge area. And I thank you for working on those reforms, because as someone who has gone through the system myself and as a survivor of gender-based violence, I would really love to see a lot of changes. And I always remember when I was having a really hard time myself personally, and there was one time I went into your office, I think I was just having a tough day with the system. There's a lot of challenges we face as survivors going through courts and systemic issues, and you shared so many stories of Indigenous women residential survivors who has gone through a really tough time in court. And those stories have always stayed with me, and I want to take this opportunity to say thank you, because you reminded me how we're doing this work together. And throughout my own personal healing journey, I also learned that justice sometimes don't come from the court or the system, because the system is created with colonial, patriarchal lens, a lot of systemic injustice. But it could come from within our heart, working together, healing together, finding the sense of ourselves together, and also as a community to support each other. And I know you've done years and years of work on the front line working with Indigenous women and survivors and residential school survivors. Those are critical work, I hope, and I see that, how you're bringing to your experience. Can you tell us a bit more kind of a concrete roadmap of what the government is doing on this reform, especially surrounding family violence or gender-based violence that touches 1/3 of women here in BC? Yeah,
it's an area that needs so much work, and we've had some very recent tragic cases, but since becoming Attorney General, and I want to thank you for being so brave with how you share your experience, because what I find is with the people that come to me and that are brave enough to tell me their story, I always think about the 100 of other people that didn't have the time or weren't weren't in the place to have the courage to use their story to change things, and how I need to hear their voices too. And through people like you, we start to hear that, right? So there's so much we need to do. The family law aspect is one component of it. So the changes around family violence will hopefully give the tools better, the justice system better tools to protect the people when they need it and come to a resolution faster. One of the things we know is that nobody wants to be stuck in family court for long periods of time. It's traumatic for the people involved, for the kids involved, and so we want to make sure we're getting to resolution as quickly as possible. And when there's family violence, we know that that's a particular area where we have to make sure that the court is hyper-focused on making sure safety is at place and really understands how family violence shows up. And then for those things that we can just resolve outside of a court, so people are not in having to go through years of expensive court proceedings, we're trying to get those out of the court system as quickly as possible. So it's a really big project. I'm also asking for very particular changes to the criminal code. I think what we've seen with some really tragic cases is that when somebody's brave enough to come forward and to tell a police officer, to make a complaint, to go through a criminal process, not only is that a hugely courageous thing, what they're asking for is for the system to keep them safe. I've come forward and told this terrible violence that I'm experiencing at the hand of my partner, and I want the system to help me stay safe. And we need to make sure that that happens, because there are gaps in the system where it's clear that it hasn't or doesn't. And so we did a big review of that system with Dr. Stanton. So she asked like everybody, she asked, you know, the judiciary as much as she could, the prosecution service, the RCMP, frontline worker or organizations, and said, what are the gaps? Like, what do we need to change? And so she's tooled me with like all these recommendations that we're working through. Some of them will be the criminal code, some of them will be better training for systems to use it and better accountability, so we can understand how to make that better.
I know a lot of advocates are asking also for risk assessment, just you know, throughout the process that you were describing a survivor goes through. Will that be part of it?
Yeah, so we've asked for better risk assessments at all stages, and I know there's some organizations that see that very clearly when when a woman comes to them to complain, the different systems not understanding the risk that they're under by that person, especially when they've complained, because that's heightened already, right?
Yeah.
So at different times, whether it's corrections or RCMP or the court, do we have the right risk assessments in place? We're adding that to the family law as well. So one of the changes that we're proposing to make is just to help a judge know that if there's family violence, they have to take into account safety. Like, what's the safety plan for this process? So it's kind of integrated more into the thinking that's there. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a long way to go until we continue to fix the system, and the system will never be perfect, but I think with advocates, I know a lot of advocates see you as an advocate in the system, in government, advocating for changes, and hopefully we will be able to see some really concrete results in the coming years, and also hopefully the public will be aware that gender-based violence, family violence is a public safety issue. It's not a private issue. It touches 1/3 of women and more who have not been reported. And hopefully this is something that everybody can see it as a top priority for our government and for our society.
Yeah, and just on that point, I think it's really important for everybody to understand the statistics on that.
That's right.
Because although serious violence and death against men is going down, like those kind of murders, against women it's going up. So the stats in Canada and BC really tell that story that you just said, that this is actually something society needs to pay attention to and address.
Yeah. So. Sometimes when I'm working on gender-based violence issues, and I think about how years and years ago people didn't talk about anti-racism, right? There was a lack of awareness about racism, how it impacts, you know, all of our daily lives. But now people know the word anti-racism, people know the importance of it, most people at least. And I hope that one day gender-based violence can be like that people have a deep understanding of it, and also starting with our public education with young children. But I want to kind of switch focus to other topics, because your ministry is huge. It deals with a lot of other legal issues. And there's one topic that the Chinese language community has been really paying attention to, which is the court ruling in favor of Cowichan Nations asked for fishing and title in Richmond. I think it's about 7.5 kilometers of land, that including a lot of residential areas. So a lot of residents in Richmond are a little nervous, and there's a lot of Chinese language residents who want to learn more about this. Can you tell us the background and what's going to happen? Is it going to impact our local residents?
Yeah, I know this is a really big topic, and I'm really glad that we have the space to talk about it. So it was a big decision that came out recently. It's about 800 pages on that decision, so it's very complicated.
Do you have to read it all?
Yeah, I mean, we have also a team of lawyers in our ministry that's really going through every word to understand everything. And I think the thing that comes to mind for me is that we announced pretty quickly that we're going to be appealing it because of the uncertainty that I think it leaves British Columbians unfairly in this state. You talked about it, right? What we need in the law is real clarity when it comes to private property rights and the interplay between all of the other work we have to do with reconciliation, acknowledging the history that we have in the province with our nations, and finding that path forward. And I think it's unfortunate. I think the decision leaves more questions than answers, and so that the work that we need to do is we're going to be asking for an appeal of that, so that it goes to a higher level of court.
Okay.
And we're going to be seeking a stay, which legally means that we're asking the court to say, look, let's put this decision on hold for now, any potential implications, until we get more clarity in the law. What we need to have is a system where people can understand what their individual property rights are, and we can find a pathway with nations to figure out how to reconcile. I think the really good example of this to people that I want to give is the Haida. So for the Haida Nation, we recognize their title through legislation, first time ever. But what it did was acknowledge the kind of colonial history and how it impacted them, but also built in agreements on private property rights and how that interplay happened between the title. So it provided that kind of certainty and transition to the future, which is what we always are seeking. So it's very important work, and I think my view is that because of the lack of clarity and the implications of this current decision, like many of these decisions, I think it'll be appealed, and we'll ask for an appeal, but it will take a while to get the legal clarity on that.
Right, and I know the local Musqueam Nation is also fighting and has expressed their displeasure with the decision. How do you deal with such a complicated situation like this when nations may not agree on an issue, and at the same time, it is so important to move ahead on reconciliation?
Yeah, you know what? The best success we've had has been at the table, right? When we've actually opened up the table and space to talk through these issues, and we're going to be renewing that with the parties of like this, the Musqueam, the Cowichan, like let's see if we can talk about it and come to an agreement. Because it's an 800-page decision, the reason is it's very complicated. It's years of history, where the Musqueam have a idea and perception of their facts of what happened, and then the Cowichan does, and the Tawasin has another perspective. So these are all things that are part of the complicated history of this province, right? Yeah. So I think our job as government is to seek out that agreement and seek out that certainty every chance we get. And that's where I think we've had the most success. The courts have constantly sent us back to the negotiation table in any kind of cases with our First Nations in BC. Like the Chilcotin happened over 10 years ago, right? That was the first Aboriginal title claim.
That's right, yeah.
And it happened in BC. And for 10 years, we've been sitting down with them, like trying to sort out what that means.
Working on
so the courts have consistently said, go and sit together and try to figure out what the path forward is. And just to say that I think we've also been able to unlock a whole bunch of opportunity through that. Like our last call for clean power in BC, which was adding 8% of clean energy to the grid. Over 50% of that was with First Nations equity. So it unlocked this joint opportunities. And we have a lot of projects with critical minerals up north where we're working with the local nations to say, let's do this all together, right? And it's unlocking like a lot of opportunity for people, including the local nation. So there's I think there's a very hopeful path forward in every situation, and we have to stay focused on that.
So do the property owners, the residential property owners in Richmond, I think near Number 5 Road, do they have to worry for now, or they can
they can know that we are seized with it, that we're going to ask for an appeal, and we're going to seek the clarity of the law at this time and ask the court to put that decision on hold until we sort that out. So we'll be representing all of the issues, including the private property, especially the private property owners that I don't think had a fair shot at giving evidence at the trial. So we'll be in court, I think, longer on this one.
Many more years to come. Okay.
Probably, yeah.
And for some of our audiences who may not fully understand the importance of reconciliation and how that's actually also connected to anti-racism, right? There's a huge Chinese language population here in Richmond and across Lower Mainland. And sometimes when we talk about the rights of Indigenous peoples, I often see a connection there, especially through my years of work in government. But not everybody fully understand that. You, as the Attorney General, has a big role in decisions like this, in processes like this, how do we ensure that people understand that committing to truth and reconciliation is anti-racism, is to create a more justice world? How do you do this work through the justice system?
It's such a good question, because I think as British Columbians, when we're in this province, we get the beauty and the connection of this living in this society in this province, and we also get the history of what happened here. They come together, right? And the pathway forward that lifts everybody up is the one where we are like acknowledging what happened. In the not so long ago past, I used to, as you mentioned, represent residential school survivors, and that was like in the 90s that they closed. And I think now more people appreciate that, but it took years, right, for survivors of residential school to make people understand that this is a living impact, like it's constant and it's around, right?
People are still impacted by their families who were in residential schools.
Yeah, and these are our neighbors. These are people that have the longest history on this land, right? So the only path forward for, I think, a government, doesn't matter what the political stripe is to figure out that path forward together, to lift all the opportunities for everybody, and to make it sure, and I think this for a lot of people, like a lot of times just simply a government acknowledging that what happened in the past was wrong. It may not have been me as Attorney General, but it was previous Attorney Generals that did a lot of harm with their laws, whether it was, the Chinese community, for example, right? Like with the head tax, and we had one of the most racist legislatures in the country in BC against Asian immigrants. There was a time period where if you looked at the debates that were happening in Victoria, the same place I sit and you sat, they were talking about, against the federal government, about keeping the Asian invasion or whatever racist terms they used out of
the
BC.
Orientals.
They were really racist in Victoria. So we have a history that's complicated, and acknowledging that past, acknowledging that is part of our history, and then finding the path forward, I think is the way to build a whole society, right?
Well, just throughout this conversation, I think people can show how you also, with your lived experiences as a diverse woman of color, that you're integrating into your policy and the work, and you can see a lot of passion from our conversation. For you yourself, as a woman of color and also younger, I think most politicians still tend to be on
You can still use the word younger, I love that.
You are younger. Have you ever personally feel those systemic challenges and the pressure more on people of color, women of color, or minority groups, or underprivileged groups? Because I sometimes often see how the legislature, the political world is still a very privileged place, and you now has an important role in government as a deputy premier. I love saying that again and again. What type of pressure have you felt yourself, and how in the system, what are you doing to change that and make politics or our whole society a more welcoming, more equitable space for all?
That's a really important question. I feel like it is my role to try to make the system better. I think just like a lot of women of color that are in positions where they hold leadership, that the line between making a mistake is very thin. You're not afforded the same level of, what's the word you would say, like as like a man or a man that's not a racialized man, right? As the ability to make a mistake before the public or the people around you
100%.
Don't give you maybe the same level. So I know that I have to show up every time representing myself and the people that I might be paving a path for the best that I can every time, and that line between just doing a good job, like as much as I can. And then every time I have a low day, sometimes I really love to meet women of color that are like just about to go to university or in university, and they'll ask me questions about what their future is and what they're thinking. And I think to myself, well, the reason I'm doing it is so they won't have to deal with that struggle when they get there, right? That it will just be normal. Like that we have a range of people at the table with different perspectives that represent our province, and that power doesn't have to be held a certain way. It can be held many different ways. And that's how we build like a better society. So definitely I think there's a difference, and I think there will be a future hopefully where that just isn't even a thing, right? Like,
thank you.
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, totally. I often think that the world is how we perceive it to be, but for hundreds of years, the world has taught us to see through a colonial lens, through an inequitable way, and very capitalist now, right? Lots of competitions and challenges that gives advantage to a group of very privileged people. And there's a lot of systemic, whether it's racism, sexism, ageism, right? And socioeconomic inequities. There's so much of it. And I just love what you said. And just as you were describing about, you know, how you have to show up to be perfect. There's no perfect, but we try our best. And for women of color leaders like you, the burden is really heavy. And I thank you for doing this work. I remember our time in the legislature that there's always a whole bunch of us women of color or people of color who would come together in our little office, the child care office, to talk about challenges. And I just really hope the society and the public understands that burden and the work that you're doing, and hopefully we can all support each other in a very collaborative way to move ahead and to look at the chessboard we have in front of us, the system that's laid out in a colonial way, but how can we create our own system with a whole new lens and with more people like you?
Well, thank you, Katrina. I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's something for all of us to think about, is that I feel this thing in this, and I think a lot of us do, about our commitment to democracy and being Canadian and being a British Columbian, and what that question means. And as we think about that, I think there is something about us understanding what we have and what we need to change in a different way. Like, what is democracy to us? What does it mean to have a system where you can be part of a society that believes in those values of working together and building a society together? And there's something about us questioning and understanding that deeper, so we don't lose it.
100%. And we do it on a daily basis in every way we can to support each other. I would love to talk to you for a long, long time and continue this conversation, but of course we are going to come too close to the end of our conversation. So one last quick question. What would you like to tell yourself? And I love asking, I asked the Premier this question. I asked the Premier the same question too, and he had a good answer. What would you like to tell yourself when you leave office? Hopefully many years later, of course. I really would love to be able to point to things where I know people's lives are better. I mean, it really is kind of as simple and as complicated as that I want to make it. It's my job to make things work better for people, and if I can leave office saying that I know that because of the projects we were able to drive that happened, then I will leave with a full heart. Well, as a friend, you've already made my life better, and I can see how you are doing your best to make our community and more people's lives better. So thank you so much, and this is such an honor and privilege to have you on our show on Monday Forum. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
是的，我们非常感谢今天能够请到我们的副省长跟我们的政律厅长 Niki Sharma， 他也是我们 Vancouver 的省议员，然后来跟我们分享他的心路历程。相信大家都可以看到他的热情跟他的真诚，也希望我们的社会能够继续努力，大家一起把社会变得更平等、更美好。谢谢大家的观看，希望我们下周再见。